So, folks, we have to talk about the fact that everything with the Iran war is about to hit the fan. And I think you all should just be aware of what's going on specifically. But right before we get to that, we have some breaking news here, which is certainly not going to help things. As of about 20 minutes ago, hundreds of Israeli settlers have apparently stormed the Al Aqsa Mosque. Around 1,300 of them, in fact. That's not good, actually. It is supposed to be that only around 150 are allowed in, and 150 Israelis are allowed in at any time. In large part because the Al Aqsa Mosque is one of the holiest places to Islam. It is, I believe, like the second or third, I think third holiest place. It is considered incredibly sacred. And over 1,000 Israelis storming the compound in order to get inside is quite bad, actually. And this is undoubtedly going to be seen as a provocation to basically everything that is happening in Iran, everything that is happening in Gaza and the West Bank. This is just another huge problem, right? And all of this is going to exacerbate political tensions in the region. Now we get to the shit hitting the fan on a grand scale, global scale, even. Now, many of you will, if you've been keeping track of the coverage, I've been talking about the Bab al-Mandeb Strait for a while now, because Iran has been intimating that they have some kind of arrangement with the Houthis in Yemen around the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. Now, Iran has locked down the Strait of Hormuz up here, and it is now becoming apparent that as part of the renewed hostilities between the United States and Iran is impressing upon the Houthis the necessity of them shutting down the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which effectively shuts down all traffic through the Suez Canal and would effectively be a second economic nuke going off, essentially. It's not good at all. And up until now, there has been a lot of talk around that, but it looks now like the Houthis are actually going to begin employing some form of blockade. Because as of about 5 hours ago, Saudi Arabia has confirmed attacks on ships in the Red Sea, trying to go through the Bab al-Mandeb Strait. And the Houthis have claimed that they have attacked 2 Saudi oil tankers in the last day. And so what's happening now is preliminary, but if this does continue and there is a shutdown of the Bab al-Mandeb Strait, we're in really deep shit, because we've already been running low in America on the strategic oil reserve, and we don't have that much longer left with that. And if the United States, out of necessity, is forced to curtail exports of oil to the rest of the world just so that, US oil prices are fine, the global economy is going to be teetering on the brink of collapse. And that is really fucking bad. That's where we're at right now. The shit seems to be in midair, about to hit that fan. And that would be globally, everyone is running low. Yeah, but the United States is one of the biggest oil producers on the planet. So the United States shutting down oil exports would be even more devastating to everybody else. And that's not even talking about the diesel prices, because a lot of what people don't really understand is that the ships that were let through during the ceasefire with the Strait of Hormuz were largely carrying non-diesel oil. And what that means is the reprieve that nations got when it came to oil was largely not related to trucking as a as a form of what their oil goes towards, right? So what that means is the United States is especially low on diesel, and diesel prices are kind of fucked for the near to medium term. And that in turn means that prices are going to be soaring much higher. And as is usual, like the prices probably aren't going to rise overnight, but like a lot of those price increases are going to play out over the course of months. And it's quite bad here. What would it actually be an export ban? I thought the point of the oil reserve was to stabilize the price of oil by artificially increasing global supply, regardless of where the oil physically ends up. Well, the strategic oil reserve was specifically for domestic use. The oil reserve in the United States is not to stabilize the global economy; it's to stabilize the domestic economy, so that if there are disruptions to international oil lines, the American public has like a buffer period so that there's not just an instant collapse of like American infrastructure, right? But we've been using that, and it's fucking going up in smoke, We're going through it fast. We've got situations already where Russia has cut off its exports because it needs its oil for domestic use at this point because of Ukrainian attacks deep in Russian territory. And so what we're seeing is a lot of the major exporters of oil are kind of hunkering down now. And that puts the international community and economy at large in a lot of danger. I mean, when you've got CNN posting shit like this, a new front is opening in the Iran war, oil faces no way out. And yeah, because if the Houthis are successful with this blockade, and despite the fact that the international community, I believe, has been underestimating the Houthis in Yemen, people are starting to be like, hey, wait a minute, what if they can actually blockade the Bab el-Mandeb Strait? Yeah, they have the capacity to do this. They have short range and medium range arsenals that can hit oil tankers. So this is really, really bad news, and would effectively create a two-front war and bring Yemen well and truly into this, because you think that the Houthis in Yemen do this and no other nation retaliates or goes to war against Yemen, you got another thing coming. And the problem is that's kind of what the Houthis want. To remind you guys, the Houthis have basically been at war the entire time, because they've been fighting groups backed by Saudi Arabia and the UAE within the Yemen civil war, from which the Houthis emerged as the dominant, most powerful faction. They are good at one thing, and it's fighting. And so, effectively, there's this idea here now that Donald Trump wants to try and end this war as quickly as possible. And that's where you're getting some reporting that, Trump's air war in Iran may be reaching its limits, and Trump's trying to put more pressure on Tehran, but the regime isn't budging so far, and there's no clear endgame for the war. And the buzz behind the scenes, according to the Washington Post here, is that, apparently Donald Trump is considering a switch into all-out war, which would possibly include a ground invasion. And that would go extraordinarily badly. It would be catastrophic. The U.S. is planning for a wider war, said one U.S. official familiar with internal administration discussions. What that would look like is apparently, and this is according to Euronews here, Iran vows to bomb own land as fears grow over Kuwait incursion. Iranian MPs called for capturing U.S. soldiers, launching ground attacks on Kuwait and Bahrain as discussions grew over a possible ground operation by either side, and U.S. strikes entered their 10th consecutive day. This was a couple days ago, right? What is, I think, very possible is Iran mobilizing ground troops to invade Kuwait and Bahrain. Because I think people forget this, because a lot of what has been happening so far has been the United States bombing the shit out of Iran and threatening to bomb civilian infrastructure, bridges, power plants, etc. But there hasn't been boots on the ground inside Iran. So what a lot of people forget is that the Iranian military is fucking huge. People don't seem to, in America, don't seem to be really reckoning with the fact that Iran has one of the largest standing militaries on the planet, you know? And that's just talking about its own, like, formal military. It also has, like, volunteer paramilitaries within Iran that are powerful and trained and willing to fight as well. So when we start talking about the Iranian military, I want you all to understand there's around 610,000 troops within Iran who are active troops. They have another almost 350 to 400,000 in reserves. And that's not counting paramilitaries. When you start to look into a lot of this, it would make a whole lot of sense if Iran committed forces to invading Kuwait and Bahrain. Both are very squishy. Both have relied almost entirely for the United States as kind of an aegis of protection. Ground troops in Iran are largely not able to do much to counter an air war or a war that's playing out with missiles. So it would make sense for Iran to commit forces to do a ground invasion of Bahrain and Kuwait. This would be catastrophic on a global scale because both countries are integral to oil, natural gas, etc. supplies. What then you have to ask is like, okay, so then we have boots on the ground here. And I want to stress, this was a completely avoidable war. There's no reason for us to be fighting this war. No one was blockading the Strait of Hormuz prior to Donald Trump bombing the shit out of Iran. And we could still go back, maybe not anymore, but when there was a ceasefire, we could have still gone back to Iran not having control over the Strait of Hormuz. For Donald Trump, that wasn't good enough. So this is rapidly spiraling into a situation where we could have multiple countries being invaded, and the United States could be mobilizing for a much larger and prolonged war without the approval of Congress, without any legal reason for it to be happening. And this is going to be devastating economically on an international scale, but it's going to be immensely destabilizing. And who the fuck knows if the Houthis get involved and if Iran is invading Bahrain and Kuwait, where it goes from there could spiral out quite a bit wider across not just the region, but the world. And that is quite, that's quite bad, there's no real other way to say it here. Iran, it's worth noting, is messaging out there, we want land invasion, boast decades of war prep. Now, that might read to a lot of folks, oh, well, they're being, they're beating their chests. They're not being serious about this. Iran is one gigantic natural fortress. It's considered the graveyard of empires for a reason, and they've been well aware of U.S. hostility since the United States overthrew their democracy, and they are not excited about a ground invasion, but they have been mobilizing their military for decades specifically for that eventuality. It's kind of like how North Korea has been mobilized the entire time to go to war against South Korea at a moment's notice. It's kind of like that. Now, the Iranian folks are saying, quote, or rather, this is Glenn Dyson, who is a political analyst. He said, the Americans are planning an invasion. I'm not saying it will necessarily happen. I'm not saying it will necessarily happen in the next few days, but they have plans for an invasion. Or rather, that wasn't Glenn Decent. That was an interview with Glenn Decent. This is Syed Mohammad Marandi, who's an Iranian American academic. That is true. Like, the United States does have plans for an invasion. The United States, however, does have plans for an invasion of practically every country on Earth. Donald Trump is a crazy son of a bitch and might just commit US forces to a ground invasion, which would very, 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 very likely have an incredibly high death toll. Like, even doing a boots on the ground invasion of Karg Island would be devastating to US ground forces. And Karg Island is a relatively small target. It's truly, I don't think people get it. Like, I don't think like we've seen US troops die in the numbers that could happen in a ground invasion since like the Korean War. We could be like, this has every hallmark of turning into like a prolonged quagmire if a ground invasion happens, but like the kind of prolonged quagmire that wasn't like Vietnam, where it's fighting against a bunch of folks who are doing hit and run tactics and surprise traps. It's going to be like the Korean War, where there were much higher casualties. Is Cuba safe? Fuck no. Like, in all of this, if the theater of war expands, if anything, it gives the Trump administration more cover to do something like, oh, we need to do an invasion of Cuba too, because they're the enemies right at our gates. They might be working with Iran, haha. Like, if anything, it just gives them more of cover to do that insane shit, you know? In fact, it wouldn't surprise me if folks like Marco Rubio were actually, like, kind of salivating for a wider Iran war, because it would allow them the opportunity to do just that. Anyway, here's John Ossoff questioning Pete Hegseth earlier today. And again, have to point out, John Ossoff has been catapulted into the consideration for the 2028 presidential election by the way he's been talking and comporting himself. So right now, I think his popularity is... I saw a recent poll that had, I think, Gavin Newsom, then John Ossoff, and then AOC. I think AOC was at like 15% support. Ossoff was at 18%. I think Gavin Newsom was at like maybe 21, 22%, if I'm recalling correctly. I don't have it in front of me. But here, let's dive into this.
Okay, and let me just begin by expressing on behalf of all Georgians our immense gratitude and admiration for the service members who are making tremendous sacrifices and conducting themselves with extraordinary selflessness and professionalism on behalf of the United States and our state's unified condolences and grief for the families of the 4 killed in action, and our hope for a swift recovery for the nearly 100 wounded over the last 2 weeks. And thank you to you for your service to the nation. Mr. Hegseth, you're requesting roughly $68 billion for the department through this supplemental, correct?
67, yes.
And yesterday, your department stated publicly, quote, U.S. forces struck Iranian military command centers, maritime capabilities, missile and drone launch sites, and air defense systems to degrade Iran's ability to continue attacking commercial vessels.
I'm not impressed by John Ossoff. Well, that's because you're not a liberal. Liberals find him very impressive. They think he talks like a white Obama.
That was a press release from your department. Is that a broadly accurate characterization of ongoing operations?
That sounds broadly accurate, yes.
On day 14 of this conflict, Mr. Secretary, day 14, nearly 5 months ago, you stated that Iran's military had been, quote, destroyed and, quote, made combat ineffective. That was on day 14 of the war. Was that an accurate statement?
They didn't have a Navy any longer. It's completely sunk. Their missiles were buried underneath a lot of their underground facilities, and their defense industrial base has been almost completely destroyed. So as far as a military assessment of Iran's capabilities, it didn't mean by any stretch of the imagination absolute zero, but their capabilities
Mr. Secretary,
at the lowest level
you
they've been in a
stated
very
that
long time.
on day 14 of this conflict, in the second week of the conflict, you stated that Iran's military had been, quote, destroyed and, quote, made combat ineffective. Was that an accurate statement? Yes or no?
Iran's ability to challenge the United States of America at the level at which we're capable of.
That's not what I asked you, Mr. Secretary. You said on day 14 Iran's military had been, quote, destroyed and, quote, made combat ineffective. Yes or no? Was that an accurate statement?
What the American military has done to the Iranian military is a historic military defeat.
Will you answer the question
and they're ineffective
under oath?
in that context.
3 weeks later, you declared victory. That was now nearly 4 months ago. 3 weeks after you'd already said Iran's military was destroyed and combat ineffective, you said, quote, Operation Epic Fury was a historic and overwhelming victory. You said Iran's military had been rendered, quote, combat ineffective for years to come. And you stated we had, quote, achieved every single objective. Were those accurate statements?
It certainly was, on behalf of the men and women in uniform, a historic military victory over Iran.
Had Iran's military been rendered, quote, combat ineffective for years to come? That was a statement that you made 4 months ago.
They had 160 naval vessels
you need
in
to
the
answer
Blue Water
the questions,
Navy,
Mr.
and they're
Secretary.
gone. Their Air Force is completely combat ineffective, and they don't have a defense industrial base.
Excuse me,
describe
Mr.
to me a
Secretary.
country that doesn't have an Air Force, a Navy, or a defense industrial base, and I will describe to you a country that does not have an effective
Mr.
military.
Secretary, you stated,
it can lob missiles.
Mr. Secretary, you stated
missiles,
4
but it's
months
not a
ago
combat-effective
that Iran's
military.
military had been rendered, quote, combat ineffective for years to come. Has Iran's military been, for the last 4 months, combat ineffective?
It's been set back not just years, but likely decades.
You stated we had, quote,
build at the level
it's been set back decades. They're still able to choke off the Strait of Hormuz, though, with no effective military, apparently, with a military decades set back. Well, like, it doesn't really matter if they're set back decades if they're able to throttle international shipping effectively.
Before, not
you
even
stated
close. It
we
doesn't
had,
mean
quote,
it doesn't have capabilities.
Mr. Secretary, you stated
Did he try to say that missiles aren't combat effective? Yes.
we had, quote, achieved every single objective. Was that an accurate statement 4 months ago?
The main objective of this was to ensure that Iran never gets a nuclear weapon. Their main sites were...
Was that the main objective? Because it seems like people are still very confused what the main objective actually was.
Obliterated. We're watching over them, and we're holding them that issue. If they don't give them up at the table, there's other ways we can take them away.
Early in the conflict
Iran will
on
never
day
have
3,
a nuclear
Mr.
weapon.
Secretary, early in the conflict, day 3, you said one of those core objectives was to, quote, destroy the missile threat. And as you restated on day 5, to, quote, obliterate Iran's missiles and drones. Those were clearly and repeatedly stated core objectives of the campaign, which 4 months ago you declared had been completed victoriously with every single objective achieved. Were those objectives achieved 4 months ago?
No one ever stated that every single missile was gone. Ultimately, combat ineffective means they're not able to dig them out of their UGFs and shoot
Had
at
the
us.
missile...
But they were and are able to do that. Our own intelligence reports indicates that oftentimes following an airstrike, these silos are cleared out within like 30 minutes to like a handful of hours. Like, well, they'll have to dig them out. Okay, they've been doing that though. They've been doing that pretty effectively, and then continuing to launch missiles.
Doesn't mean they don't have underground facilities where they put missiles in them and hold on to them because they're the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. So we never expected they would stop having capabilities to shoot. The question is at scale against an opponent like the United States of America, which went toe-to-toe with them, and Iran couldn't.
You stated on March 8th.
I mean, Iran clearly could handle it because they're still firing missiles right now. And in fact, if they continue to fire at the rate that they are going at and using drones at the rate they're using drones, they're going to burn through all of the US's remaining anti-air stock of missiles and interceptors. Like, this is catastrophic. Like, if we run out of that shit, our we do not have the capacity to replace them as fast as we've been using them. It will take years and years and years to rebuild up our interceptors, to intercept air missiles, or to intercept drones. And the argument here, like, oh, they can't even handle it. Bitch, they're waging a long-term war of attrition, rather. Like, the second we're out of interceptors, our ships are sitting ducks.
8th, day 9 of the war, on 60 Minutes, you assured the American people of Iranian surrender. Does that remain your prediction?
Ultimately, Iran will never have a nuclear weapon to threaten the United States of America. That has...
Idiots chanting death to America? Who are you talking to? I've never said death to America outside of quoting someone like you. Also, you'll pay $10 per gallon to keep rainbow lights off the White House? Are you willing to pay me $10 per day to not buy like a rainbow colored light to shine at the White House? Because for $10 per day, I'll happily not do that. But also, I've got bad news for you about the spectrum of visible light that hits the White House every day.
Been the objective, and it remains so.
Go grab yourself a prism. You'll see what I mean.
So just to review, you will not answer whether your statement made on the 14th day of the war that Iran's military had been, quote, destroyed and made combat ineffective was a truthful statement to the American people as you sit here and ask for tens of billions more for the conflict.
Senator's time has
Had a
expired.
historic and effective military campaign against the largest state sponsor of terrorism.
Won't answer the question.
They never
Senator
get a nuclear
Peters.
weapon, Senator.
Like, we are truly in like a fucked time period right now, because as all of this is happening, I want to remind you all, this is from about like a week or so ago, 2 weeks ago. Hegseth's study of women in combat is designed to reach one conclusion. So what is this about? This Mother Jones piece, I'll link in the chat here for you guys to read at your leisure, is essentially that Pete Hegseth has ordered a study done on the effectiveness of women in combat, and it is designed in such a way as to reach a conclusion that women are not fit to serve in combat roles, which would, of course, lead to women being kicked out of the military. All of this happening on the verge of potentially going to full-scale war with Iran is just, like, that's stupid. It's so stupid. Yeah, let's diminish our fighting force by getting rid of volunteers. What time for the draft, baby? What's your objective here? To educate. And on top of that, we don't know how many people have died in the Iran war, which sounds insane, and yet Nick Terse here on this beat has been unable to get a clear answer on how many troops have been killed and injured in the Iran war, because the Pentagon is apparently covering that up. Iran strikes caused dozens of casualties and the first deaths in action since the ceasefire collapse, a U.S. official said. Crushing wave of attacks in Bahrain, Iraq, Jordan, and Kuwait left U.S. forces in disarray, causing significant damage to facilities, dozens of injuries, and the first troops killed in action since a June ceasefire collapsed, according to a U.S. official. 3 Army soldiers were killed in a devastating ballistic missile attacks on Muwafaq Salti Air Base in Jordan, said the official, whom the Intercept is not naming because they were not authorized to speak publicly. A second official confirmed that several died. At least 4 and as many as 10 troops were also injured in the attacks on Jordan, according to the first official. In northern Iraq, a U.S. service member was killed, another wounded on Saturday when an ordnance from a downed Iranian drone exploded. CENTCOM claimed the injuries occurred during a controlled detonation of the downed craft. The surge in deaths and injuries raised the U.S. Official casualty count to at least 446. U.S. casualties have increased by more than 15% since the first ceasefire between the United States and Iran. The first official told The Intercept that recent attacks had wounded far more personnel than are reflected in the Pentagon's current casualty count. They did not provide numbers, but said dozens had received medical attention. Neither CENTCOM nor the Pentagon replied to numerous requests by The Intercept for information on the casualties, nor would either address the effort to cover up U.S. losses. And reporting by The Intercept previously found the Pentagon's official tally of the dead and wounded personnel is a gross undercount stemming from what one U.S. government official called a casualty cover-up. The Defense Casualty Analysis System, or DCAS, which tracks deceased, wounded, ill, or injured service members from Congress, or for Congress and the President, is missing hundreds of dead and wounded personnel. The official tally was also previously adjusted downward by 15 casualties without explanation, and for months the Pentagon has ignored requests by The Intercept for comment or clarification. So, just as an FYI, we aren't getting the accurate information out of the Pentagon regarding how many troops have died, how many troops have been injured, etc. We're already in the territory of the losses are apparently so bad and so politically damaging to this administration that the Pentagon is just refusing to report accurate information. If nothing is done, this conflict is only going to escalate. There is, as far as I know right now, no foot on the brakes to slow this down, to get us back to talks. And even if we could get back to talks with Iran, why would the Iranians believe any kind of US commitment? There's no reason. There's no reason for them to believe or put any trust in what America has to say. Donald Trump is the president that ripped up the JCPOA in the first place. The deal that prevented Iran from engaging in the act of trying to get nuclear weapons. Donald Trump unilaterally ripped that up back during his first term. And now the Pentagon is lying about casualties. They're lying about whether or not they'll do bombings. They're threatening to do war crimes on a daily basis. Donald Trump is threatening to bomb civilian power plants and bridges, which are, under the Geneva Conventions, war crimes. Not only that, we've committed ourselves to ostensibly peaceful negotiations only to bomb them continuously while trying to negotiate with them and just seemingly expecting them to be okay with it, which they're not. Countries typically don't take it well when you bomb them during peace negotiations. We literally threatened to kill their diplomatic delegation. There's no reason for them to believe us because none of the actions of the United States government under Donald Trump are things they can rely on, other than they can rely on being stabbed in the back when it comes to negotiations during peace. Yeah, it's truly a situation where this is a scam. This is a scam to do war profiteering to enrich Trump's family, which, by the way, they are profiting quite greatly off of this conflict. And also, it's just, again, lies upon lies upon lies upon lies in an effort to consolidate authoritarian power here in the United States. And Iran is a convenient punching bag, but it is one that is being consistently underestimated here, and it can do far, far, far more damage than it has yet done. And it kind of seems like the constant betrayals are edging them in the direction of doing far more damage rather than winding this thing down. So I want to say that especially if the Bab el-Mandeb Strait closes, y'all should be expecting shit to hit the fan economically in a way that people are going to notice here in the United States. Because some folks in Vertical Chat who are in their twilight years might be willing to pay $10 per gallon for gas. Massive industries that rely on shipping are not going to be okay doing that. Many of them may shut down or pause operations. And then that runs down to the food available in grocery stores. That runs down to the toilet paper being available on store shelves. And it runs down to everything being far more expensive for average Americans. And I want to point out that the average American right now can only absorb like a couple $100 before they're well and truly bankrupt. There's not a lot of wiggle room economically for the most impoverished people here in the United States. And if prices jump up from what $10 a gallon would be, well, some boomers who are sitting on hordes of wealth might be fine, but there are going to be a lot of people who've got nothing else other than pitchforks and some torches, and shit's going to start popping off all over the place. There's a lot of room it might seem right now that there's a lot of room between that point A and that point B, but once an economic crisis is well and truly underway, the distance between those 2 points shortens quite a bit. Just, stay safe out there, folks. If you got anything out of this, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave a comment. Let me know what you think in the comments about all this. And also, get involved locally. Get organized on a local level, okay? Because ultimately, that organization is going to be the engine that helps us fix everything that is currently getting fucked up. And the better organized you are, the better you can protect your community when that economic bomb goes off. So join your local Dems, join your local DSA, get involved. And if you don't know where to start, join our Discord, reach out to GamerG for help with DSA, reach out to Dragonfly for help with your local Dems, and get involved, okay? All that being said, folks, check out ImogeneOlivia.com. Gender euphoric lingerie designed from the ground up for trans femmes, tested with cis men, cis women, non-binary folks. It is comfortable, sexy, non-tucking lingerie. And guess what? We got a whole new restock. We got 2 new sizes. We got a new color. Go check it out, ImogeneOlivia.com. Link down in the description. Let's keep on going.
Riverboat Jack is coming to town. All the viewers gather round. Twitch and YouTube and swishy streams. All that content is bursting the scenes. Politics, gaming, plenty more. Your sense of fashion you'll adore. So grab your stuff and hop aboard. We're going straight to Jack's Discord. Riverboat.